just can't breathe.
Do you feel your bones start to shake? Do you feel the earthquake? Do you feel your bones start to shake? Do you feel the earthquake? Do you feel your bones start to shake? Do you feel the earthquake? Do you feel your bones start to shake? Do you feel the earthquake?
Yo guys, what is up? Max on Wonderlands video, and today we're going over my build Volt Viper. This is a dot focused melee build where we're going to be doing a ridiculous amount of melee damage, a ridiculous amount of dot damage, and we have some survivability, and we do bossing. It's pretty gross. We're gonna go over everything you guys need to know today. I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you do, be sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. And with that, guys, let's get right into it. All right, so we're gonna start with a little boss mount, and then I will explain my gear and the mechanics at play here and kind of go an overview of this build. All right, so we're hopefully gonna Parasite's gonna hit us. That's gonna break our shield. I'm going to light up Parasite just a little bit with some slow and some dot, and then swing once or twice, and then it's dead. So that is our boss kill. This is one of the fastest boss kills that I've seen. It's genuinely disgusting. And the weapon that I'm using, sorry, my UI is bugged. It's always bugged. The weapon that I'm mainly using, and there's two really good weapon choices that I've been enjoying for this thing. One is the Wailing Banshee of Cleaving, which you can get from the Banshee boss. And the reason this thing is amazing is because it's got a high base damage and it comes with Echo. I'm sure you could get probably a better purple, but this thing for mobbing with its Wailing Banshee works really well. We're not really using that for bossing because we're just kind of hitting a boss, but the way that we're scaling our dots, the way that we're dealing all this damage is dot damage is going to scale off of initial melee hit. And when I light up an enemy and get all my status effects and procced on them, I'm going to, one, when I hit them like a truck with Echo. And all of my dot damage is going to scale off of my initial hit, meaning that we're getting dot damage on bosses. I probably was too late for that, but hitting like hundreds of thousands of dot procs. And we're hitting them in all different elements. We're debuffing enemies so much, and we've got so many different damage multipliers that anything just melts. Now, the other weapon that I really like for this is the Twin Soul of the Assassin. I've got another one with Caustic, which melee attacks increase your status effect chance and damage by 30% with also Echo. This thing melts as well, but I noticed it doesn't quite melt just quite as hard just because of this slightly lower base damage. But both of these are super strong, and the Twin Soul, when you can hit up an enemy multiple times super quick, melts things just about as fast. It's just not as like you have to hit an enemy a little bit more times, which looks less cool. So the rest of our gear that I'm using the Live Wire with On Action Skill Start, increase melee damage by 40%. Note that I made a video about the Live Wire. The Live Wire is actually super important for this because when you hit an enemy while holding the Live Wire, you send out electric chains, and those electric chains proc status effects on enemies, and this is very much a dot build, and those status effects will change to other status effects and spread to other enemies. We're basically debuffing and melting entire rooms of enemies just by hitting enemies with our Live Wire. And once again, it's also really great for just procking some status effects on enemies before we nuke them. The other thing that I'm holding is the Liquid Cooling. The Liquid Cooling is really nice because it's cryo. It's got high chance of slowing an enemy, which synergizes very well with my Icebreaker, which I'm getting up to 60% damage against frozen enemies, which is just gross. Plus, it's got a blade on it for plus 25 melee damage. For our shield, the shield that I'm rocking is the Knuckled Cursed Wit. On spellcast, increase melee damage. We're basically stacking up our melee damage like crazy. Plus 30% melee damage against bosses. On action skill start, increase melee damage by 40%. Cursed Wit on spellcast, increase melee damage. We're just hitting enemies with our melee like a truck, and our dots are following suit, basically. For my class mod, the one I've been using is a BrrZerker power, because BrrZerker is going to give us bonus cryo damage on our melee attacks. Plus, convert 30% of our Fate Maker's damage dealt to Dark Magic damage. Dark Magic efficiency is increased by 30%. Now, For bossing, this isn't like the most ideal class mod, but for mobbing, what's so insane about this is we don't need to take a single point of healing or survivability, because when I hit enemies while holding the live wire's chains will be converted to electric and dark magic damage, meaning you're hitting an entire room with dark magic damage with one melee hit. Plus, we have the Wailing Banshees, which Wailing Banshee melee attacks will also hit surrounding enemies, meaning you're basically dark magic damage dotting an entire room of enemies, which will all give you 5% of your HP back per little thing. So you're healing like crazy. We really have some good survivability on this build, which is crazy. We are using a Cryo Buffmeister. This is a BrrZerker Stabbomancer build, so we're increasing our frost damage, and also the more frost damage that we're going to do, if we can get enemies closer to freezing, they're just going to take more damage. Nothing's really going to survive that much. And then for our amulet or talisman, we've got increased frost damage, Stabbomancer power, so we can be in our From the Shadows more. This is probably better if it was BrrZerker power, and then the legendary thing doesn't really matter, but we got status effect damage and all damage dealt. And then lastly, for our rings, we've got a melee damage ring, and we've got a Ring of the Surgeon's Eye, which is a blue unique. If you want to check the description, I will have like information about where you can go get this, but it's going to give you bonus melee damage rotating between elements. And once again, our very much so our goal is to have as many dots as an enemy as possible. When we start status procking an enemy, we're going to get contagion, and then that contagion is going to proc more status effects on nearby enemies and new status effects. And for each status effect, we're getting Exploit Their Weakness for a 6% damage increase, which I believe goes to 30. I think there's 5 elements, so 30% damage increase, which is gross, on top of a 60% damage increase. Plus, we're getting multiplicative damage increase from 1,000 cuts, multiplicative damage increase from swift death, increased crit damage. It's just so gross. For my hero points, I'd recommend the Village Idiot background, and I'd recommend putting all of your points into Strength for crit damage and Wisdom for status damage. Where you put your other points, you could either put it in skill cooldown, which I have right now, so that I can be in my From the Shadows more often, or you could put it in Crit Chance. The reason I think Crit Chance is a little less useful is just because we're constantly like critting all the time when we're in From the Shadows. So if we're in From the Shadows more often, then we have to care less about crit chance, and we deal so much more damage in From the Shadows, just because I've got a lot of like action skill things on. So yeah, that is my hero points. Now let's do the skill tree. For our actual skill tree, I'm gonna be honest, the most important thing is that you pick Stabbomancer, but I messed around with this on Stabbomancer Spell Shot, Stabbomancer Clawbringer, and even Stabbomancer Graveborn, and like it all works. Like it all just works. If you want to make this build work, you could go into any variation of Stabbomancer with whatever, as long as you're using like things like the live wire, and you're using weapons to spread dots, and you're increasing your dot damage dealt. The Stabbomancer skill tree will carry most damage and most of your builds. The rest is kind of just complementary nice things to have, such as like increased damage when we're close to enemies, plus damage reduction, damage to frozen enemies, and frost damage. This works really well for me because my melee weapon that I'm using is Cryo. But for example, if you had maybe a dark magic weapon, maybe you'd want to go into the Graveborn tree and go more dark magic things. This build is extremely flexible. You can play it how you'd like. I personally went Stabbomancer BrrZerker because of the innate synergy of frost damage against enemies, and when an enemy is chilled or frozen, they're just going to take like multiplicative damage increases. So that is why I went this. Also, just to explain some skill points, I wish I had more skill points. I want everything in this Stabbomancer tree. I didn't take like this percentage increased melee damage or this percentage increased melee damage, just because we're already getting so many increased percentage melee damage increases. So I tried to scale my damage off of multiple things, aka I tried to get more damage multipliers in my skill tree and my formula, like critical hit damage and damage dealt, rather than just straight up percentage base, because I already have a lot of percentage base, and this alone is giving me 60% melee damage increases. But the most important skills here are Alchemic Agent, melee criticals apply a random status effect. This is beautiful, 1,000 cuts, and Executioner's Blade, while not needed, is just more damage on top of the already crazy damage that we are already dealing. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Melee, gonna be honest with you, is difficult to work into. It kind of sucks early game, to be honest, but late game, with the right damage scaling, it is genuinely one of the strongest builds. Gives you tons of survivability and tons of damage. This was one of the most fun builds I've had working on, so I hope you guys enjoy it. I probably will have the save file in the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, exclamation or check the description for the Discord. I almost said exclamation mark Discord, like I'm Twitch streaming. But check the description for a link to the Discord. So if you want to get this save file, you can, so you can mess around with this build. And yeah, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.